how is this not like a sin tax, like taxes on, say, alcohol and tobacco? In this case, it is a law designed to discourage a certain behavior, and if successful, that would mean gradually declining revenues year after year. Would you consider that a success?
Yeah, so that's a great question,
How
right?
is that good tax policy is what I'm asking.
So here's the point to make about Measure N and vacancy taxes in general. This is part of a no-regret strategy and an all-hands-and-the-kitchen-sink approach to affordable housing production. This is not a silver bullet. This is not going to solve. And if it does work, and I'll flip that and do the positive, this incentivizes owners to use their space, right? And so instead of discouraging, we'll say it incentivizes folks. And so yes, over time, in places, the revenue could drop over time. However, Santa Cruz is an incredibly desirable place and will probably continue to be very desirable over time. So when that drop-off happens, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years. But in the meantime, according to the city's own fiscal impact report, and I'd like to just bring it back to that, the city had access to databases that are not publicly available to anyone, and they said it's going to raise millions of dollars. So I'm not sure what experts, Ms. Renshaw, but the experts at the city who actually do this for a living and it's their job, says we're going to get millions out of this. So if we get millions for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's better than not having any millions. And those millions can be leveraged into tens of millions, and we can get affordable housing in this community now.
Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so we believe that people should be able to come and go freely without city control. The city and the city council, it's not in their purview to be creating rules about what we can and cannot do with our lives or else pay $6,000. To understand how intrusive Measure N is, let's dig into the exemptions. The audits will require sharing very personal information with the city. So let's take these exemptions of extended hospitalizations, moves to assisted living, death. I went down that path with my father a couple years ago. And now if this were to pass, I would have to go into the city with medical records, assisted living records, a death certificate to clear my father's estate of a tax. And that there's more rules that the city can do because it's open-ended in terms of creating new rules or making the rules more stringent, reducing the number of days, so now suddenly everybody has to be in their home for 300 days, that type of thing. And then real quickly, I forget what I remember, 15 seconds left, she's saying that it'll be something, it's better than nothing, but it could actually make the situation worse because when we have these over-regulating of rental properties, people can sell the rental properties, decrease the housing supply, lower supply means higher prices. Thank you.
Okay, let me ask you, Lynn Renshaw. No, you got your turn earlier. We're going to go with this now. The yard signs and other literature on No on N claim that this measure is too invasive. Essentially, all homeowners would be required to do is check a box on the form that their property was occupied for 4 months or more out of the year. Why is that too invasive?
Our main concern is the audits. So the audits require 3 years of documentation and evidence. Exactly what the documentation evidence, part of why I was going through those exemptions, because looking at those exemptions, you could imagine, okay, it was a medical absence. Gee, I need to go to the hospital and get the medical records. It was assisted living. I need to, prove that transition to assisted living, and all of those things. Right now, the city does not collect personal information beyond name and address for water and garbage, with the exception of ADUs where there's a requirement for proof of occupancy. On the list of that proof, it's a tax return, a bank statement, information that people think is very private and that the city currently does not collect And furthermore, as I said before, the city does not need to collect that information.
Cindy, go ahead and comment on the auditing process that she mentioned.
Sure. So maybe people raise their hand, maybe they don't, but who's ever been audited by the IRS? 2? 3? Oh, that's really interesting that it's all the people from the no on end table. Huh. Nobody but the no on end people raise their hands for the people online. So I don't know what that says. But anybody can be audited at any time by the state and federal government. So this idea that everybody's going to be audited every time they turn something in is just not true. It doesn't happen. We have lots of government programs, and people are not audited every time they file. The declaration process, as you point out, is very, very simple. It's modeled after what happens in Vancouver. And the reason that was chosen, it was purposeful. We did a lot of research because this was a big decision about how to do this and to respect homeowners. We have a bunch of homeowners who were part way in the beginning. And so why we chose that is if you have city staff have to go through every single available database and every piece of paper to decide who may have to pay the tax and who not, that is an incredibly high administrative burden and administrative cost. That's why we chose a self-declaration process, and you are only required to provide paperwork if you are audited. So not when you declare. The declare is just as you described. You check a box, you push the button, you're done.
Okay, Cindy, let me ask you this. Let's say after the first year of the new vacancy tax, you have raised X millions of dollars in support for funding affordable housing. What then? How is that money deployed? Does this tax oversight committee make the decision on how that money is deployed and then recommend certain projects in certain areas? Do you hand it over to the city planning department? What do you do with that money?
Absolutely, great question. Again, this is kind of the real core of what we wanted to do with Measure N, is because we wanted to ensure that the funds raised would be indeed used to create affordable housing. And so it's defined in the measure what constitutes affordable housing and the lower income levels that are set by the Housing Authority. And so the Oversight Committee was modeled after school bonds. They have no decision-making authority. The only thing the committee shall do is they'll meet once a year and they will daylight a report on a third-party audit, okay? So that's it for the committee. The city council could direct the committee to do other things, but that would be at the direction of the city council. Our elected officials, our city council, would be in charge of deploying the money within the defined uses of the tax. And it's important to point out this does not go into the general fund, and it goes into a new fund created to the uses defined in the tax, primarily for affordable housing, to pay for the administration of the tax, to pay for a third-party audit. So that's what the money can be used for. The city council are the folks who would make the decision.
Lynn, what's your view on where the money goes that is raised?
Well, I think it's important when discussing affordable housing. I think a lot of people haven't yet learned exactly what it is. So it's not lowering everybody's rent. It's a certain type of housing. This will go into a fund. It's a large apartment building. According to the Turner Center for Housing Innovation in Berkeley, 13 affordable apartment buildings underway in the Bay Area. The costs are increasing up to about $1 million a unit. So if there's $2 million in the first year, which will decrease in the following years, $2 million after the expenses, then that would be 2 units. And so I think that it's very cruel of some of the candidates to say Measure N will make housing affordable for everyone. This might create one building, maybe it's a few dozen units, it'll help a few dozen families in a decade. The other 65,000 residents will be in the same situation. The rent will not be lower, the housing prices won't be lower, it won't do anything for them. So again, it's a very broad promise, kind of an empty promise compared to the reality of what this can accomplish.
Okay, great. This next question to Lynn. No one is certain just how much money this new tax will raise. You have your number, you have your number. But even in the lowest estimates of that number, it would be something to put toward building affordable housing. Are you uncomfortable in brushing aside these possible revenues in what most people think is a legitimate crisis?
I think that the expense to the city compared to the revenue coming in, it may not even, it'll be a drop in the bucket. The numbers are very uncertain. The city also highlighted in the fiscal impact report that the committee that will include a UCSC renter, 2 low-income people, and a union member, nothing about homeowners, that committee could consume up to $500,000 of the city's resources because they have the ability to request reports, studies, bring in experts. So they're going to be sucking up a lot of city resources on its own. And sure, I'm not opposed to throwing $1 million towards a future affordable housing building, but the amount of trouble, the bureaucracy, and all the hardship on other people, let's say some senior citizen gets audited and they're not I know that the young people would say anybody with a house is rich, but somebody on a fixed income that has a house that gets audited, they have to pay the tax, they have to go through all the rigmarole. There's a lot more impacts. So I think to just say it's $1 million, we'll take it at all costs, is a little bit oversimplified. And then there's the way that it could backfire again with the extreme rent control. 200 rental units that we know of were taken off the market. They were owner-occupied. They were rentals that turned into owner-occupied homes. Something like that could easily wash out the benefits of the one unit you would get for the $1 million.
Cindy Dawson, wouldn't it cost some administrative money to put this through, and what percentage of that would go towards?
Absolutely. So let's just emphasize a couple things. This is a no regrets strategy and part of an all hands on deck strategy to get more affordable housing, full stop, pause for drama. And so the city are the experts in who administer programs. I'm not, I don't think Ms. Renshaw is. They did a fiscal impact report, and they looked at the low end of their revenue estimate, and their administrative costs were covered. So yes, of course, any government program costs money. Not sure what's going on there, but anyway. So you can look it up. So 15%, you can use your calculator, 15% of 2.5 million is $375,000. That was less than the administrative costs that they estimated. Also, if the city, it costs $500,000 for a committee to meet once a year and publish one report, I think we have serious other problems. So, just saying.
Okay, Cindy, in a story that was published in Lookout Santa Cruz by our reporter Max Chun, you gave the following quote. A lot of people are pretty disillusioned with our leadership, meaning the city, and they don't trust them to really meet what is our number one community need. What did you mean by that?
I think that if you look around the country and around the globe, really, affordability crises are not unique to Santa Cruz, right? And so there are lots of places taking very effective steps to address affordable housing. Our leadership in the city hasn't brought anything forward in the past years as this crisis has continued to just accelerate. And so we thought about bringing it to the city council. We talked to council members, and we were told that they would not bring this to a vote at council, and so we went to the community. So that's kind of what that quote was referring to, is that there are policy solutions. So this is a complex issue, but there are a lot of very smart people in the world who are figuring out very effective ways to actually get affordable housing in communities like Santa Cruz. And so they should be bringing those forward. I'm on the planning commission. We've tried to move things forward, and they go to council. Council votes them down. Council votes down more affordable housing and some of the developments that are happening. We've talked about linkages fees for commercial development. The council is not moving on that stuff. So we as the community said, hey, we have an idea, let's bring it forward. It works other places, it'll work in Santa Cruz.
So when you talk about the leadership, you talk about the city council. I mean, you are part of the general leadership in this city as the chair of the planning commission, right? And
well, the Planning Commission primarily is an advisory body. So we do have a little bit of decision-making authority, but primarily we're an advisory body. So when we vote on something, it then goes to council, and council makes the final decision.
I'm still a little unclear on that, because we have affordable housing going up everywhere. There are buildings under construction, there are buildings on the verge of groundbreaking, there are buildings in planning stages. It seems like this community is on the accelerator when it comes to building affordable housing. Is it not fast enough for you?
It's not fast enough. No, there's absolutely more we could be doing. And again, we're not making this up. Other people are doing these things. And so yes, we are creating affordable housing, but the need far exceeds what we're creating. And we need to be, maybe we have a foot on the gas, we need to have both feet and both hands on the gas, and there's ways to do that.
Lynn, you want to respond?
I'm more focused narrowly on the flaws of this particular measure rather than the big ball of wax that was that amorphous there. I did want to say read the quote about Oakland's law, which is much better structured, and which its administrative costs were $100,000 last year. The administrative costs of this one, it's $1 million the first year. Oakland's law, section 454-100 states they use objective available data to identify properties that are most likely to be vacant and then send a notice. The city administrator may send initial determination notices for the property that the city administrator determines are most likely to be vacant, unquote. And then I'm skipping over a little bit, but the other point that I want to make is that the exemptions are very limited. So there's no exemptions for traveling for work, spending extended time at a partner's house if people are traveling back and forth between their house and their partner's house. There's no exemptions for taking care of elderly family. There's no exemption to going to another state to be with your dying mother. It doesn't accommodate circumstances during a divorce or medical complications. And again, it's not the city's purview to decide how you live your life. Last thing, the city can change these rules without a public vote. They could make more limits to how people spend their lives.
Okay, thank you very much. We just have a few more minutes. We're going to do some questions from the audience that I have written on some cards here. Thank you for sending those up. For Cindy Dawson, can you explain how Measure N furthers the, quote, DSA goal of ending capitalism, as you have stated? Did you state that?
Public record.
So the Democratic Socialists of America is a political organization, and like most political organizations, especially Democratic ones, they have a wide view of how politics should be done in this country. Let's just be clear that a property tax depends on capitalism and property ownership to work, because it's a property tax. So I'm not sure what the question is going for, but the bottom line is, this, that we have an incredibly broad coalition of folks supporting this. For instance, we have Santa Cruz YIMBY and Santa Cruz for Bernie supporting Measure N. I don't think they've ever agreed on anything, but perhaps Measure N.
Well,
And
don't tell them that now, once they hear about it.
labor, environment, and political organizations like ones you may have heard of, like the California Democratic Party or the Santa Cruz Democratic Committee, have endorsed Measure N. So we have a broad coalition across socioeconomic levels, across political ideologies, because this is simple. It's easy. We know it works. And so we're not recreating the wheel. And so this is a chance for us to get millions for affordable housing. Let's just keep bringing it back to, we are going to make millions of dollars that will be leveraged into tens of millions of dollars to create more affordable housing in our community, to bolster the efforts of our city staff that are trying to get more affordable housing. So let's come together and do it together and get more.
Lynn, let me give you a chance to respond to that.
Yes, I happen to have the quote that Cindy Dawson made. It's a video quote that we have recorded. The empty, yeah, it's pretty, anyway, the heckling over there, go ahead. The empty homes tax is to build working class power now while working on the longer term project of ending capitalism. And part of why this is remarkable is that, of course, capitalism is a federal system, and there's not going to be any ending capitalism through local city laws.
Do I get to respond to that?
Please, go ahead.
So again, we're talking about a measure that is a tax on private property. I am an owner of private property, and it is to raise money for affordable housing. My political views and the political views of everyone working on this actually don't factor in, because we are all coming together for affordable housing. This is not about politics. This is about our community. This is about filling our neighborhoods. This is making sure that we strengthen our community and stabilize our workforce. So politics are truly aside in this. I think Wallace brought it up. I'm not running for office. This is not about me. This is about all of us coming together and getting more affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask Lynn Renshaw a question here. You have talked a lot about how there should be no criminal penalty for this because it would be declared a misdemeanor for lying or cheating on this declaration. But if that's the case, if there is no criminal penalty for this, how can the city enforce this tax? And wouldn't the burden then just fall on honest taxpayers to?
So there's a difference between criminal penalties and civil penalties like fines. Oakland's vacancy tax does not have criminal penalties. They do not have these steep fines of $1,000 a day. And I want to remind everybody that here's the quote on the penalties, 338-100A, quote, "Each person in violation of this chapter may be charged with a separate offense for each and every day." So if you take the example, you're a week late with your occupancy status, which has to be done every year. The first 2 days are infractions, because that was 2 days, and then every day after that it's a criminal penalty. Again, these are the types of penalties that are designed for different kinds of crimes than missing paperwork.
Cindy, go ahead and respond to that if you'd like.
Yeah, so does anybody know anybody in jail for not filing a form with the government? I don't. So let's be real about what this says. An infraction is not considered a criminal penalty. You have to repeatedly ignore the requirements of the measure, just like any other tax. And if you repeatedly ignore those requirements, there are ever increasing penalties. That's kind of what we've agreed on is fair as a society. So it's not Measure N, it's kind of just how we work, right? Like if you get a parking ticket and you don't pay it, you get another chance, you get another chance. It starts marching up over time. This is the same approach. And so this is not an unusual approach to how we just, as a society, has decided we want to enforce these laws that we put on the books. So I would just say that I really encourage people to go look up the enforcement and penalties. And I also would point out that Santa Cruz Together brings up that they focus on putting qualified people in office to ensure that we have good governance. I've spoken with the attorney, the city's attorney. There is a clause because we do know that it is common practice for policies to need a little tweaking when they are adopted. And so these people who Santa Cruz Together elects can make sure that this is fair and balanced and reasonable, and that for folks who choose to leave their home empty for more than 8 months, that they have a fair process to move through, and it'll be a fair process for all of us.
Okay. We don't have much time left. We couldn't get to all the questions that were submitted. Thank you for that, but we will incorporate them all into our reporting and lookout, so please look out for that. Essentially, I have one final question for you, and I'm going to address it to Cindy, and I'm going to give Lynn a chance to react on this. The most optimistic numbers that you would raise as part of this tax are really dwarfed by the real costs of affordable housing. I mean, almost what, 1%, 5%, something like that, of the real cost to build something. Given that, is it worth it to set up a new bureaucracy, a new requirement for Santa Cruz homeowners to have to deal with? You mentioned that this is an all-hands-on-deck kind of moment, but is this too, I don't know, is this too little a benefit for that kind of ask for Santa Cruz homeowners?
Great. So let's take that kind of one at a time here. So I think it's important for us to point out that this tax was structured in a way to minimize administrative costs. A lot of time and effort was put into that. The other thing I want to point out is that I don't build affordable housing for a living, so I went and talked to a lot of people who do. And they have told me, and the reason they know this is because they have done this, that they have leveraged small amounts of money into millions or tens of millions of dollars. And I think it's important for the folks considering this and what the benefit will be to understand that those experts have told us, and they are endorsing this measure, that millions of dollars can be leveraged into tens of millions of dollars.
Leveraged how? By investment or?
Grants.
Grants.
So there are lots of grants.
Matching grants.
So I used to work at the state. I used to administer state money. A lot of grants kind of require, sometimes it's a one-to-one match, but often it's not. It's sort of like a good faith investment in a grantee. So you could put in $100,000 and you could end up getting a grant for $4 million, which I've had those at the state that I've administered. And so that is something that happens, and it's something that can happen here because affordable housing experts have done that. So the impact, again, this is a no regret strategy. If the money coming in is low for a year, the city can scale their administrative costs accordingly. Audits are some of the biggest costs. There's no minimum requirement of audits for the city to conduct. If they had a low year, they could just choose to not do that. So you could scale the administrative costs to ensure that we're getting the benefit that we need.
Okay, let's have Lynn have the chance to respond. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's take the example. It is true that affordable housing is sort of a financial layer cake. I've been to many presentations by people who solely work in that domain, people like Diana Alfaro and others. But let's say that we can layer it up to 50 million. Again, that would be 50 million units. It would probably take a decade. So then there might be 50 families that would get the low-income rental, and that would leave 65,000